The early morning sun kissed the rooftops of our suburban haven, casting long shadows that crawled lazily over manicured lawns and pristine driveways. This was a neighborhood where tranquility was meticulously maintained, a place where whispers of dissent were swallowed by the hum of sprinklers and the rustling of wind-chimed trees. It was a sanctuary of sorts, or at least it was supposed to be. My truck, a loyal beast of burden with years of stories etched in its dust-worn paint, occupied its usual spot in front of my home. It was an old friend, more reliable than most people, and certainly more than the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian, Karen. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of floral prints and judgmental glances, thriving under the umbrella of the HOA like a sunflower turning toward the sun. For days, perhaps weeks, her discontent simmered. The truck, in her eyes, was an affront to the aesthetic purity she meticulously cultivated. It was as if its presence alone defied the very essence of suburban harmony. And so, the notes began to appear, slipped under wipers with the stealth of a cat. They accumulated like autumn leaves, each one a carbon copy of the last, bearing the same sterile decree: violation, non-compliance. I smiled at their persistence, a peculiar dance of annoyance and amusement playing across my mind. It was easier to let her have her moment. After all, small battles were best left to those who needed the fight. My mind drifted to the birds warbling in the distance, their songs a sweet reminder of life's simple pleasures. Days bled into one another, the rhythm of life carrying on with its usual cadence. Karen's fervor, however, was relentless. Her devotion to the bylaws was a marvel to behold, a testament to her unwavering commitment to order. I imagined her, pen in hand, a modern-day crusader in a war against the untamed. But beneath the surface of our silent skirmish, a plan began to take shape. It was not born of malice, but of opportunity, a quiet rebellion against the tyranny of her complaints. The HOA parking lot, a patch of asphalt largely forgotten at the edge of our community, caught my attention. Its acquisition was surprisingly simple, a transaction concluded with the ease of a handshake and a signature. I strolled through the lot, its emptiness echoing with potential. Here was a place beyond Karen's reach, a blank slate upon which new rules could be written. The irony was delicious, a twist of fate wrapped in layers of poetic justice. My mind hummed with possibilities, each one a gentle counterpoint to her rigid doctrines. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The tranquility of the evening wrapped around me, a silent promise of things to come. In the distance, the soft glow of porch lights flickered on one by one, a chorus of warm welcomes. With a final glance at my truck, standing resolute against the encroaching night, I turned toward home. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of grass and the faint whisper of a breeze. Tomorrow would bring change, but tonight I embraced the peace of the present, content in the knowledge that the game had only just begun. Silence was a fickle thing in our neighborhood, much like the rules Karen concocted under the flickering fluorescent lights of the HOA meeting room. Mornings were punctuated by the distant hum of lawnmowers and the chirping of renegade sparrows. My truck, a beast of burden, stood parked in front of my house, a metallic testament to practicality and rebellion. A rebellion Karen would not let stand. Her ire, once limited to furrowed brows and the occasional sharp glance, had metastasized into an all-consuming vendetta. Every morning, without fail, a new citation adorned my windshield like a badge of dishonor. Each slip of paper declared my truck an affront to the aesthetic harmony of our cul-de-sac, a phrase Karen wielded with the zeal of a crusader. Absurdity lived in those rules. They were a kaleidoscope of arbitrary restrictions, each more capricious than the last. grass length dictated to the inch, approved shades of paint numbered like commandments, a labyrinthine code crafted to ensnare the unwary, yet tailored to sanctify Karen's whims. Her power play was a symphony of pettiness, conducted with a baton of bureaucracy. Meanwhile, whispers slithered through the neighborhood like ivy creeping up a forgotten wall. Gossip, that ancient and shadowy messenger, painted me a villain, a maverick challenging the ordained order. I was the reckless disruptor, they said, the one who dared defy the queen of the HOA court. Karen's kingdom was crumbling, and she needed a scapegoat. The irony was a bitter, delightful pill. Her relentless pursuit of control only highlighted its fragility. A fragile, paper-thin veneer she draped over our community, pretending it was woven from the fabric of civility and propriety. But rules are only as powerful as the fear they inspire, and I, for one, was not afraid. Evenings were my solace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the pavement, I would sit on my porch and watch the world slow down. In those moments, the absurdity of it all would wash over me like the cool breeze, a gentle caress, reminding me that power often stumbles under the weight of its own hubris. Karen, oblivious to the cracks forming in her empire, continued her campaign with fervor. A letter arrived, a summons to an emergency HOA meeting. A melodrama in 3 acts, no doubt. My attendance was obligatory, it proclaimed, a term Karen likely savored. But I held the ace in this game, a card Karen never saw coming. The parking lot, that expanse of asphalt once belonging to the HOA's collective oversight, was now mine. A simple purchase, executed with the same quiet resolve I had cultivated through years of dealing with Karen's antics. And with ownership came the power to rewrite the rules. A shift in the winds, subtle yet undeniable. As the day of reckoning approached, I could almost taste the anticipation in the air. The neighborhood, though largely unaware, was on the cusp of transformation. Not the revolution Karen imagined, but a restoration of balance, the quiet triumph of the reasonable over the ridiculous. The time would come to reveal my hand, to shatter the illusion Karen had so meticulously crafted. Until then, I would savor the silence, the calm before the inevitable storm. The parking lot was mine, but the real victory was in the waiting, in the knowledge that justice, like a well-placed parking spot, was worth the wait. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt. The parking lot stood empty, a silent field of opportunity. I stood at its edge, letting the cool breeze carry away the last remnants of my frustration. The purchase was final, the ink dry, and the deed now lay snug in a manila envelope at my side. It was time to reshape the narrative. Karen had been a fixture in our community, her presence as predictable as the sunrise. Her daily reports about my truck had become a monotonous hum, a background noise I had learned to ignore. But this wasn't about ignoring anymore. It was about reclaiming space, literally and metaphorically. I surveyed the lot, calculating its potential. Its expanse was a blank canvas, each parking line a stroke waiting to be made. Here, rules had once been rigid, unyielding, but now they were mine to mold. Underneath the surface of calm exterior, a plan simmered. Months of meticulous documentation of every petty parking infraction, every unjustified complaint, had culminated in this moment. Each entry in my notebook was a piece of a larger puzzle, one I was finally ready to assemble. My reflections wandered, tracing the path from irritation to empowerment. Karen's complaints had been a catalyst, igniting a dormant resolve. Her daily battles were fought with the fervor of a general, her clipboard her weapon of choice. But wars are not won by skirmishes alone. The irony was almost poetic. Her relentless pursuit of conformity had led to this grand upheaval. The rules she clung to were now being rewritten, and she didn't even know it yet. I imagined her reaction, the flicker of disbelief that would dance across her face, turning her well-practiced frown into something bordering on confusion. Perhaps she'd sense the shift in the air, the subtle but undeniable change in authority. A subtle smile crept onto my face as I envisioned the new signs that would soon grace the lot. Their messages were simple, yet profound in their implications. Parking permitted for all residents without discrimination. Trucks, SUVs, and every vehicle in between. Freedom, at last. As twilight deepened, streetlights flickered to life. Their steady glow was a reminder that change was afoot, ushering in a new era of parking equality. With Karen's influence waning, a quiet revolution had begun. My truck, once a symbol of her ire, was now a testament to resilience. It sat proudly, its silhouette a defiant stance against the backdrop of dusk, a vehicle of change, if ever there was one. I turned from the lot, leaving behind a space that was no longer just physical. It had become a symbol of empowerment and quiet defiance, a testament to perseverance. Tomorrow, the news would ripple through the neighborhood, subtle yet undeniable. An undercurrent of change, a whisper of rebellion. The power had shifted, and with it, the rules of engagement. And so Karen's reign of pettiness would meet its gentle end, not with confrontation, but with quiet resolve. A new chapter had been written, by my hand, in ink that would not fade. The morning sun peeked over the rooftops, casting long shadows that crept across the pavement like silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. My truck, the old, reliable beast that had been the center of so much controversy, sat proudly at the edge of the newly acquired lot. Gone were the petty notices, the scribbled threats tacked under windshield wipers by HOA Karen, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. With the purchase of the parking lot, a subtle shift had begun. First, it was a murmur among the neighbors, a whisper of change carried on the autumn breeze. I could feel the weight of curious eyes from behind drawn curtains and the occasional twitch of blinds. They all wanted to see what would happen next, how this bold upheaval would ripple through their lives. The air was thick with a tension that was both exhilarating and unnerving, like the calm before a storm, pregnant with possibilities. I took a deep breath, savoring the crispness of the morning. It was a day like any other, yet different in its potential. As I walked the perimeter of my new domain, I noticed Mrs. Jenkins from across the street pretending to water her already hydrated azaleas. She paused, hose in hand, eyes flicking towards me, then quickly away as if I might catch her gaze and turn her to stone. There was power in being observed, and power in not acknowledging it. The irony of it all was not lost on me. Once the subject of scrutiny, now the orchestrator of it. The parking lot remained empty save for my truck, a testament to the quiet revolution I had set in motion. I imagined Karen stewing in her living room, blinds drawn, fingers tapping against each other in frustrated rhythm. She had reported my truck daily, a ritual of control and annoyance, and now her complaints fell silent into the void I had created. The new rules I had instituted were simple and democratic. Open parking for anyone, no size restrictions, no petty grievances. I watched as other neighbors slowly understood the freedom this granted them. A boat appeared overnight, parked brazenly alongside my truck, its hull gleaming defiantly in the morning sun. An RV came next, its owner offering a nod of solidarity as he took advantage of the newfound leniency. With every new addition, the neighborhood transformed. It was no longer a sterile chessboard controlled by Karen's tyrannical hand. It was a tapestry of individuality woven through shared space. But with change came resistance. Karen's influence lingered, like a shadow refusing to be banished by the light. Her emails, once a torrent, now trickled in with veiled threats and passive-aggressive suggestions. The HOA meetings grew more heated, her voice rising above the din, shrill and desperate. I remained calm, a lighthouse in the storm she brewed. Her words, though sharp, bounced off the fortress of my convictions. The parking lot was my statement, a monument to resilience and the power of quiet defiance. As the days passed, I found allies in unexpected places. Neighbors who once avoided my presence now lingered for conversation, emboldened by the change they hadn't realized they craved. They spoke of trivial things, weather, weekend plans, yet underneath, a current of gratitude ran deep. Karen's reign was waning, and she knew it. The crescendo of tension reached its peak one gray afternoon when Karen, in a final act of defiance, stormed into the lot, her heels clicking sharply against the asphalt. Her eyes met mine, fury and disbelief swirling in their depths. "You think you've won?" she spat, voice cutting through the chill air. I said nothing, the silence louder than any retort. The neighborhood watched, breath held, as Karen's facade crumbled. It was the moment of culmination, the point where the power she clung to slipped through her fingers like sand. And, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lot in dusky twilight, I stood firm. Karen's shadow retreated, swallowed by the gathering night, leaving behind only the echoes of what once was. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I stood there, a silent sentinel, watching the familiar scene unfold with a detachment that felt almost surreal. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that settled into the crevices of the asphalt, waiting to be released. Karen's minivan was parked in its usual spot, a veritable monument to the unnecessary chaos she had sown. Her curt notes and pointed stares had become as much a part of the neighborhood as the old oak trees lining the street. But today was different. Today, the tables had turned, and I could feel the shift under my very feet. The legal process had been a quiet endeavor, much like the slow, relentless drip of water wearing away stone. It took time, patience, and an unyielding resolve. Each form filled, each signature obtained, was a step closer to the culmination of this strange odyssey. I had become a master of patience, my resolve as unwavering as the granite hills that framed our neighborhood. The acquisition of the parking lot had been both absurd and poetic in its simplicity. A simple transaction, a handful of signatures and a transfer of funds. An unassuming slip of paper that handed me the keys to the kingdom of paved asphalt and painted lines. Standing there, I looked at the parking lot anew, a canvas upon which I could paint a different story. The irony was rich, almost intoxicating. Karen had weaponized the HOA rules as if she were the neighborhood's self-appointed sentinel, defending order against the encroachment of my truck's silhouette. But she had underestimated the quiet power of ownership. New signs now adorned the edges of the lot, standing proudly in the warm glow of the setting sun. They were simple, understated, yet they carried the weight of change. The new rules were clear and unambiguous, penned with the same precision I had come to cherish in this journey. Trucks were no longer outcasts. They were celebrated guests in this concrete expanse. As if on cue, Karen emerged from her house, her expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Her eyes scanned the new rules, her lips forming words that never reached the air. The silence between us was profound, a chasm filled with unspoken truths. In that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't the grand spectacle I had imagined. It was the quiet claiming of space, the subtle shift of power as the universe realigned around a new axis. I had not won a battle. Rather, I had redefined the battlefield itself. "Nice truck," she said finally, the words hanging awkwardly in the stillness. I nodded, acknowledging the compliment that was both genuine and begrudging. It was the only dialogue necessary, a quiet acknowledgement of the new order. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I turned away from the lot, leaving Karen to her solitude. The neighborhood was the same, yet irrevocably changed. The victory was not hers, nor was it mine. It was the quiet triumph of change, a testament to the power of persistence over petulance. The night settled in, wrapping the world in its quiet embrace. I drove my truck into the parking lot, the tires humming a familiar tune against the pavement. The battle was over, and in its place was a serene acceptance, a recognition that true power lay not in conquest but in quiet, persistent change. The weight of the keys felt satisfying in my pocket as I strolled across the parking lot. It had been a few days since the ink dried on the deed, and already the air seemed lighter. A crisp morning wind swept through, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the promise of change. A satisfying irony for the spot where countless battles had been waged against my truck, and by extension my peace. I took a moment to survey the lot, each space a silent witness to Karen's relentless vigilance. She had practically worn a groove into the asphalt with her self-righteous pacing, clipboard in hand, always on the prowl for another infraction. I imagined her watching from behind her lace curtains, peering out with hawk-like persistence, as if expecting the world to conform to her rigid standards. My footsteps echoed softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant hum of morning traffic. The stones crunched beneath my shoes, a gritty percussion underscoring the quiet revolution taking place. I had rewritten the rules, and in doing so, I had dismantled her throned authority over this blacktop kingdom. A few neighbors were out, raking leaves or setting out pumpkins, their nods and smiles more frequent now, as if shedding the burdens of an invisible yoke. The tension that had once hung over the neighborhood like a storm cloud had begun to dissipate, revealing a sky that was bluer and more forgiving. The irony was not lost on me that the very space intended to confine had now become a symbol of freedom. The truck sat comfortably in its usual spot, standing proud like an old sentinel. It had endured, much like I had, weathering the storms and emerging unscathed. Karen had not shown her face since the announcement. The notice I posted on the community bulletin board, the same one she'd used to broadcast her grievances, had been met with a mixture of disbelief and quiet amusement. "Parking lot rules revised. All vehicles welcome," it read, a simple statement that heralded a new era. And for Karen, a silent coup that left her without a cause. But I knew she'd surface eventually. A force like hers didn't simply vanish. It lingered, mulled over its next move. Whether it was a need to reclaim lost ground or a grudging acceptance of her new reality, only time would tell. In the meantime, life resumed its calmer rhythm, each day a step further from the shadow she had cast. As I turned to leave, the wind whispered through the trees, a gentle reminder of the transient nature of power. The leaves, once vibrant and clinging to branches, now formed a russet carpet beneath our feet. A cycle of change, inevitable and profound. I paused at the entrance, casting one last glance at the lot, at the lives intersecting here. The spaces, no longer battlegrounds, had become places of community, of shared stories and laughter. The HOA, once a stage for petty dramas, had transformed into something more human, more forgiving. And I, standing there with a quiet sense of accomplishment, realized that it wasn't just about a parking lot or a truck. It was about reclaiming space, physical and emotional, from those who would seek to control it. It was about restoring balance, about knowing that peace often comes at the price of perseverance. The sound of a door opening drew my attention. Karen stood on her porch, wrapped in a thick cardigan, watching. Her expression was inscrutable, yet softened by the distance between us. There was a world in that space, a delicate tension that was neither victory nor defeat, just two people standing on opposite sides of change. A small nod passed between us, barely perceptible, like the first tentative step onto common ground. Then, with a slow exhalation that seemed to release more than just breath, I turned away, leaving behind the echoes of our silent accord, the beginning of a new chapter for us all.